Hey guys, it's Jess, and I'm excited to share a new project with you. For today's project, we're going to be working on a 12 by 12 mixed media scrapbook layout, and I am going to be featuring a brand new today cut file from scrapbook.com. It has just become available, and I am so in love. So you can see I'm uploading one of the images here. There are several different images and file types that you can use with these cut files, and I've got a link down in the description for you to check it out if you'd like to do that. The one that I'm using is actually intended to be a card, but I did some editing and was able to change it into just the sentiment or the title for my scrapbook layout. The other one that was pre-made and ready had a snowflake kind of cut out of the O, so I decided to do it this way, but there are definitely other options if you don't want to do all of this editing. But basically what I'm doing is removing all of the excess pieces that I don't need by using the slice feature. And I find that this is a really good way to make the most out of the images that you have, just because you can change things to make them fit your exact layout. In this case, I didn't need the actual card panel. All I needed was the title itself, and I really like the way that that turned out. So once I get all of the pieces removed and I am left with just my sentiment, then I can go ahead and see what I want to do about the size. Size is really important because it determines obviously how big the cut file is on your layout. So to get a feel for how big I wanted this to be, I actually made a square that was 12 by 12 so that I could see if the size was going to work with the layout, and so that I could also plan my layout around the title itself. I did want to keep the title one of the main focuses of this layout, so that I could show you guys the cut file and how it works, and I thought that was a good way to do that. So then I just go ahead and go to make it, click continue. I did go ahead and double the count here. Actually, there are 3. I only ended up actually cutting 2 of them, but I just cut it out of plain white cardstock. And here we have the finished cut file after it's been cut with the Cricut. Peeling it off the mat here, you do just want to be careful because some of these pieces are a little delicate. So you just want to be sure that you are careful and gentle. Take it a little slow so that you don't rip anything or bend it where you don't want it to be bent. But just go ahead and take that off of your mat, and then you're going to be good to go. What I like to do is actually get a piece of vellum. This is just kind of like a lightweight see-through-ish sort of paper. I like to go ahead and position my letters on top of the vellum and then glue them in place. Then I cut around the vellum as sort of a shadow layer. And this actually helps my background do a couple things. It helps me be able to move the title around and figure out where I want it without having to continue moving all the pieces like this, especially when there are multiple pieces that you have to put together and it's not all just one word or one welded piece. That makes it a lot easier to be able to do that. The other thing is that it actually mutes the background behind the sentiment with that vellum piece. So things that are there in the background are a little less noisy and a little less distracting, so that when you put your title over top, it can still be the main focus, even if you have things going on in the background. So it kind of serves a dual purpose, and I find it really handy. It just makes my life so much easier when I'm doing layouts like this. So this glue that I'm using here is called a glue tube. It's from Fawn. I really like the layout of this in the little pen sort of thing there. I get a nice fine tip and I can go ahead and apply it, and it also dries clear, which is a big win for me because I'm a little messy sometimes. So I like that I can go ahead and adhere it, and even if something kind of oozes out somewhere, it's not going to make a big difference because it dries clear. So once I get all of my letters glued on, I will start to take a look at the layout and see what I think, kind of make my first step towards figuring out what I want to do here. Now, I am not really a huge planner. I kind of just fly by the seat of my pants. So I started flipping through this Prima paper pad. This is from the Apricot Honey collection, and I did find one that I thought was really cool and would work really well as a fall layout. And I grabbed some really cute pictures of my son from a couple years ago when we went to a pumpkin patch, and I thought that they looked really, really nice with that pink and orangey sort of background and the neutrals. And then, of course, the 'Tis the Season like I said, I wanted to go with a fall theme instead of Christmas because fall is my favorite. And I thought that these pictures were just perfect for this. And it's just, I mean, it's just a shame they haven't been used before. So it was definitely time for them to make their debut. So like I said, I'm just kind of trying to figure out what I might do for the layout, but I did end up changing things out quite a bit, and figuring out like which pictures I was going to use and where they were going to go exactly. But that was sort of my first general feel for it. So now I'm using some gesso. This is white opaque gesso, so it is not see-through, but I'm spreading it on fairly thin so that you can still see some of that background. Basically what this does is it mutes the background, and it also creates a waterproof barrier between my top layer that I'm going to be adding things onto and the actual paper, so that the paper doesn't warp so much and it doesn't get too saturated, and also so that my mediums don't absorb into the paper. They will sit on top instead. So as I'm spreading this fairly thin, it does dry pretty quickly, and I don't have to worry too much about waiting and letting it dry for a long time. Once I've got the gesso all down and where I want it to go, I'm going to use some texture paste from Ranger. This is a dimensional paste that you can use to add dimension to your projects, and it is opaque, and this is white. So you can tint it with other colors if you would like to, but I prefer to just put it on white and then use different colors on top of whatever I stencil through. This stencil is from Dilutions, also from Ranger, and it is called, I believe, Old School Numbers. And it's a large stencil. It's around 9 by 11, I think. So I'm just layering that on, adding in the numbers. I wasn't sure if I was going to love this, to be honest. And in the end, I am so glad that I did use this, because too many times I don't use things that I feel like, oh, well, it's not fall related. Why would I use that? And I'm really glad that I am pushing myself a little bit more outside my comfort zone and using things that I might not normally have used. So once that was dry, I did go ahead and grab some stamped images from they're like Prima mini stamps. And these are very small, maybe like 2 inches, 1.5 to 2 inches. What I'm doing is stamping it off on a scrap piece of paper first, and then putting it onto my layout. Now this is a gray ink, but it's fairly dark, and I didn't want it to be super dark. So I did what's called second generation stamping, which is where I stamped it off on a piece of paper first, and then used what's left over of the ink to stamp it onto my background. I like that this gives a more muted, faded sort of look, and it's not so in your face black, dark ink. I did also go in with another stamp from Prima as well, and this one is called Read to Me, I believe, but I will have everything linked down below in case you want to check anything that I've used out. Everything will be linked over to scrapbook.com for you. So I'm just being totally random here with this. I got kind of smart after I had that big blob of a mess there in the middle, which luckily will be covered up, but I decided to start bending the stamp so that I didn't get like the crisp edges of the stamp as well, and that seemed to help out quite a bit. Now this is the first layout I've ever done where I die cut images from my stamp sets and used those as well. So I will be coloring those off screen and using those in my layout, but I really like the way that that turned out as well. So here I have smushed some Distress Oxide in dried Marigold onto a little piece of plastic off to the side there, spritzed it with a little bit of water, and now I'm using a little piece of scrap packaging to apply that color directly to my layout. I'm just being sort of random here and adding it where I think it will look good while trying to kind of spread it out a little bit so I have a random but even-ish assortment of this orange color across my layout. And I really like the way that this turns out with these two different colors. I was a little unsure, to be honest, when I first started this, because I was like, I don't know, the cracked pistachio, the orange, the like minty sort of color, is that gonna work? But I really like how it turned out, and I like how it coordinated with that pinky peach sort of color and the neutrals in the background. So I did the same thing here with the cracked pistachio. I smushed the ink directly onto the piece of plastic, spritzed it with just a little bit of water using the Distress sprayer, and then I am using just a little piece of clear plastic to pick it up and smoosh it onto my layout. I did try to let that dry naturally because I was happy with the placement, and if you move the ink around while it's wet, obviously it will move to somewhere else. And you can also get some bubbling of the texture paste if you heat set it, whereas when you dry it naturally, it just kind of stays how it is. Now I'm using Frayed Burlap Distress Oxide. Again, I smushed it onto the plastic, spritzed it with a little bit of water. Now I'm using the Distress Splatter Brush to apply those flecks to the background. And that just kind of gave it a more, I don't know, whimsical, messy sort of look. Now I'm using a paper towel to apply some darker ink, same frayed burlap, but I wanted to add a little bit of brown to the numbered areas that weren't colored with either the orange or the green. And I thought this kind of rounded out the background nicely and sort of tied in those neutrals and browns a little bit more. If I had this to do over again, I would try to find a way that didn't get quite so much ink onto my actual background. Although I'm not unhappy with the way that it looked, I would have preferred that it was just on the numbers and not on the paper as well. Now I'm going to use that same Distress Oxide, the Frayed Burlap, to ink around the edges of my photos. I thought this made a really big difference, and it really helped the photos kind of pop a little bit more since they are colored photos, which I honestly don't really use colored photos very often. So this was kind of a big deal for me. That paper that I have there is also from Prima. It's from another paper pack that I will link down below for you. And I'll have, like I said, everything down there for you to take a look at. The pumpkins I also did cut from the same paper packs. They're very subtle, so I did end up adding a little bit of the cracked pistachio and the dried marigold to them just to tie it all together and make everything kind of match a little bit better. And then the wagon I actually die cut, and then I colored it in with Spectrum Noir alcohol markers off camera like I mentioned earlier. So once I got these photos matted, I was ready to go ahead and apply them to my layout. Now you'll notice down at the bottom I do also have the little wagon photo. So that one I hadn't planned to use at the beginning, but I did go ahead and fussy cut it around the wagon itself just so that all you had was the wagon and I could layer it right over top of another picture. I love the way that that looks, and I'm really glad that I did that. I was so super nervous to cut it. I thought for sure I was just going to have to print another photo and that was going to be that. But luckily it turned out and I really, really like it. So I don't love that this top photo overlaps with the bottom one quite in the way that it does, but my son's head was cut off in the bottom photo anyway, so for me it wasn't a huge deal. But if you didn't know that his head was cut off in the first one, you'd be like, why did you do that? Why did you put that other picture over top of his head? But it was cut off anyway, so it was the way that I could make the most out of the photos. Now I'm just going to use that same glue tube to adhere the sentiment. You can see by now I have fussy cut around the outside of that vellum like I mentioned earlier, and now I can go ahead and just glue that in place. You can also see that I've got my die cut all colored up and ready to go, the little wagon there, and my pumpkins are a little bit more jazzed up than they were before. So now I'm kind of just at the stage in my layout where I'm adhering all of the little embellishments just to kind of tie everything together and finish everything off. Now I did decide that I wanted to add a custom little bit of a sentiment. Because this says "'Tis the season," I wanted a little something more, but I didn't really have any sentiment strips that really went with the theme or seemed to fit the way I wanted them to. So I actually used my label maker and I printed a clear label with black text that says fall-y or to be fall-y. And you can see that in the final pictures here. So now the whole sentiment says "'Tis the season to be fall-y" instead of jolly. Again, a throwback to the fact that it's a fall layout instead of Christmas. That is it for me today, you guys. I hope you love the layout. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and let me know know if this cut file is something that you might want to pick up as well. If you guys are interested in cut files, I can definitely keep sharing projects with them. So be sure to let me know what you think. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you loved the video, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Give me that thumbs up if you liked it, and I'll see you guys again really soon in another video.